friends, it is the top of the hour, and so I want to make sure that we get started because we've got a lot to cover. Oh my goodness, I am so thrilled that those of you who have decided to do Roll Down Justice are going to be taking this journey. Friends, I think now more than ever, it's so important that we as the church continue to bring a message of love for all people and care for all people and making sure that all of God's children are cared for. And so this series is one that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and just was really inspired to bring this about when I saw the Lent study that Mark Miller had collaborated with the General Commission on Religion and Race last year. So I thought, oh, let's do an entire series on it for next year and make sure that people see that and that they get to use that, because I think it will be both an inward journey, right, and a journey that sends us outward. So Lent is usually a time of introspection. But here's the thing, our faith life, our internal faith life, hopefully when we nurture that, we are called and reminded that as disciples of Jesus Christ, we are called to go into the world to make the world a better place. Now, one of the things that I love about Lent is that it originally began as was developed over the first 4 centuries, developed as a time of preparation for baptism, right? So this was at a time of intense catechumenate for those who were going to be baptized on Easter Eve. So in the dark of night, the middle of the night, this was the moment par excellence for the early church to baptize persons, because that was the time that Jesus died and then was raised again. And we too, through our baptism, die to the old and are born to the new. And so I really wanted to do a Lent series that focused on that journey towards remembering our baptism there in that Holy Week, in that very special moment. And also, as we go and we look at our baptismal vows, and many of you are from many different denominations, but our baptismal vows, as I studied each denominations, really all draw on those ancient rites in some way. And so the parts are very similar, even if the wording is a little bit different. And one of the things that strikes me is that one of the questions that catechumens have been asked for ever since baptismal rites were developed is, do you accept the freedom and the power that God gives you to resist evil and oppression in all its forms? So right in our baptismal vows, in our initiation rites, is the question, do you promise to make this part of your discipleship an important thing? Because the body of Christ is here on this planet to make a better world. So that's where the Roll Down Justice, the baptismal rites, all come together in this series. And I'm so glad that you are on this journey. So thank you. Some of you may be on and you haven't decided to do Roll Down Justice yet. So this is an introduction. And so I hope that you'll be inspired as we go along to decide to do Roll Down Justice as your Lent series this year. This is our third fully scripted series, and what that means is that I actually put everything together in an order of worship, and we're going to go through that order of worship today so I can sort of explain some things. But here's the deal, no one size fits all, and so you will probably have to tweak some things for your context, and that's what we hope that you will do. We don't think that just because we put it out there in full script form that you're going to do it exactly like that. But if you do decide to do it very close to that, you're going to learn some of the things that I teach in the Worship Design Studio about congregational participation, about sensory-rich worship, about flow and transition. So this is one way that you can learn about enhancing what you do in your worship based on the principles that I teach, but also have some very concrete things to get your Lent underway and really have a great experience. Okay, so friends, let's do this thing. When you get Roll Down Justice, and that's free to all of my Worship Design Studio members, but you can also buy it a la carte if you're not a Worship Design Studio member yet. And when you download the materials, what you get in the download is an overview that we're going to go over. It just sort of gives the order of worship and describes each piece of it. And I really want you to sort of look at these things in order, because it will help make it all very clear to you if you do read these things in order. So there's the overview. There's the synopses and scriptures, which gives you that synopsis for each one of the services. That's a 2 to 3 sentence description. That's what I call a synopsis in the Worship Design Studio. And the scriptures associated with that day. Also in that document is a link to hear the feature song, Mark Miller's feature song, because that's really what the series is built around, are those songs. And so you can read through those and really get a sense at a glance of the way that it flows, the message throughout, and listen to that song throughout. So that's going to really give you a big boost right away. Now, there is a document that's called Music Notes, where I talk specifically about the music pieces, and then there are the links in that document to the songbook that you're going to want to order and get. The songbook that all of these songs are in, which has congregational song sheets in the back of it that you can when you buy the book, you have the right to copy those and use those in your worship guides. It's going to talk to you about, it's going to have all the links to buying each one of those songs in anthem form, if that's what you would like to do, rather than congregational. It's going to give you some YouTube links to listen to the song, so you can really, it jumpstarts you in helping you to learn those. So that's the Music Notes document. We also have a whole document, very large document, called Visual and Media Ideas, because I am such a big believer in how creating an environment and using those symbols in a tangible way ups our congregational participation and the ways in which we can be immersed in the story. Okay, so children's resources, that's another document that's in those downloads. So that is, my friends, it is a golden document made by Mark Burrows, who is our Worship Design Studio children's worship expert, and he has done it again. Oh my goodness. Great, great children's time. They're all scripted out for you. They're not meant for you to just read. So you want to get, whoever's doing those children moments, just get real familiar with the script and then do it yourself, right? We're going to talk a little bit more in detail in just a moment about what's in there. The Sermon Fodder and Small Group Resources document. This is going to be golden to help you prepare your sermons for this series. It's also where I have many resources that you can create, sort of mix and match some resources for your own small group time. So I'll go over that in just a moment as well. Now we have 3 music documents. One is the Roll Down Justice for Liturgy. That is an actual piece of music that you'll download. I'll talk about that in a moment, as well as Let Justice Roll, the choral humming version that you'll need for the prayer times, the petition times. So those are 2 actual pieces of music. The other thing that we got a little bit later, so you actually, in the email that you get when your order is confirmed, there is a link to the lead sheets for all of Mark's music. So what that means is that your bands that need the guitar chords, that's all right there for them. And of course, Mark's music is so flexible and so adaptable to so many different contexts that literally you could do these things. You could choose to use an organ, you could choose a piano, you could use a band. They really work in all of those different settings. So we gave you all the guitar chords for that, because the guitar chords are not in the book. So Mark prepared all of that for you. And for those of you in the Worship Design Studio, you'll find those in a separate brainstorm note in that series. All right, so then you have all the scripts for Ash Wednesday, 6 Sundays in Lent, the Holy Week service, and Easter Sunday. Now you have all of those in 2 different forms. One is a PDF. It's very pretty, it has background kind of things. And I give you that so that in case you start to mess with the Word version, which is the other version, and we give that to you so you can start to adapt that for your context, move things around, copy and paste, whatever you need to do. But if you start to mess with that and you go, oh, I wish I could see that original version again, then look at the PDFs and that will, that stays the same, right? So that's why we give you those 2 versions. So that's all the downloads, friends. You should have all of those things, and you should be able to have all that information to get you ready for Lent with that. All right, let's move forward. I want to go through this overview of the series. And so we're going to do that. Mark's going to come on. We're going to talk to him about his inspiration of music and justice. And then I'm going to go over some questions that some of you sent in beforehand and get to any questions that you might have. So Jenna's keeping track of the questions in the chat box. So if you have questions along the way, just put them over there and we'll get to all those questions. All right. So the overview, what you're looking at in the slide is the first page of the overview document. And you'll see a picture there of me in front of the Truckee River. I have the great pleasure of living in the mountains, in the Sierra Mountains, and the Truckee River flows right by my house. I don't live on the shore, thank goodness, because right now we've got 20 plus feet of snow there. But I love going and working next to that river because that flowing, living water is inspiration to me, and I hope that it will be to you too. That is really what we call an anchor image for this series, and that is the waters of our baptism, that living water that flows, that rolls down. As Amos the prophet says, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. So water is our main metaphor for this series. Now, the order of worship for most of the services, especially the Sunday morning services, right, starts with music for gathering, i.e. the prelude. That's your choice, right? And so your musicians have that flexibility to do, whatever they feel like is right for that moment. Welcome and announcements happen. I'm a big fan of doing that up front so that then when we finish that welcome and announcements, we can go into the ritual and we can stay in that ritual without kind of the announcements interrupting any other time in the service. So I've got that up front. The next thing that happens is what I call a threshold moment. When I teach worship in the worship design studio, one of the things that I say is that, it's so important for there to be a moment at the beginning of the ritual where we sort of cross over into an atmosphere that immerses us in the story. And so oftentimes I will use a theme song for that. The slide I'm bringing up now is that first page of that Roll Down Justice excerpt that you downloaded with your materials. And what Mark has done here is he's taken that theme song, which has several verses and things, and it's a choral anthem that hopefully you'll be using on Palm Sunday, the entire thing. But what you downloaded is an excerpt that he created exactly for this threshold moment. So as you look at the scripts, you will see that a soloist sings that first verse. Now, one of the suggestions that I make, I'd like to make in the visual and media document, we have several pictures and we show you where to find photos in Wikimedia. And one of the things that I want to suggest to you is that every Sunday when that soloist begins, or maybe it's your ensemble or your choir is going to sing it in unison, whatever you do, show some photos. If you use screens, show some photos of modern day marches for peace, people who are working to bring about a better world, bring about justice in the world. That would be a wonderful way of immersing us right away in the sights and the sounds. So you're going to have that verse and then the chorus, and then there's going to be a synopsis, a prayer, and then the congregation comes in on that chorus again. Let me answer one question while I'm right here, and that is that I had a couple of people say that their congregation is musically challenged and the Roll Down Justice piece feels a little overwhelming to their musicians. It has kind of a complex accompaniment there. One of the things that I want to invite you to do for that, if that piece of music just feels too overwhelming, is to go ahead and use the Let Justice Roll song that we're going to use for the prayer time, the petitions, that other music document you downloaded that has the humming, and then there's in the book, Let Justice Roll. That's a simpler song, so you can actually substitute that in this position for the threshold moment and still have that theme coming through, but use a simpler song. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility. But the Roll Down Justice song, if you can pull that off, it's just so powerful. And I have links to videos and audio links so that you can hear these things and help you get a sense of what they are as you're learning the music. Okay, so that threshold moment, the call happens, and then we go into our opening hymn. And one of the things that I've suggested very common, very familiar hymns and songs, both for traditional and contemporary. But if those are not familiar to your congregation, please choose something familiar. There's enough new music in this series that the opening and closing hymns or songs should be so incredibly familiar, because we have to always have that balance of familiar and new. Okay, so now some of these songs that we repeat over and over, they're going to feel new the first week, but by the time you get to the third and fourth week of Lent, those songs that were new at the beginning are going to feel really, really familiar. So not to worry, but I do think having some familiar songs there in the opening and closing slot is really important. Okay, I've got folks passing the peace and using use whatever is familiar to your congregation on that. Sometimes in my series, I like to give people different things to say every Sunday. But again, with so many new things, I want to just suggest that you use something that feels really familiar for passing the peace. Okay, come as a child. Here we go. This is where Mark Burrows, our children's expert, has done it again, has just brought us some incredible things. So one of the things he does is to follow what I teach in the worship design studio, which is it's good to have these repeated items, which I call threads in a series. It's what gives it its flavor. So Mark has a couple of threads here, and if you've done our series before, you know that he does this kind of thing where some things are repeated. Well, this time, the children are going to be building the church, building a more just church, and they need tools to do that. So every Sunday, the children's time is about what tools do we need to build a more just church and a more just world. And you've got a toolbox for every week, and there's a tool in it that's not the tool that we need, right? But we're going to fill it with the tool that we do need. And so that's kind of a thread throughout. Another thread that he does, he always writes a wonderful little prayer that rhymes for the kids to do, and often it has actions with it, which of course we know is really great for children. And so what I love about this prayer is that he uses the same kind of thing that the whole church is going to use in our prayer time, in our confession time, and that is holding on to something and then opening up. So the first part of this prayer, the kids are going to hold on to stuff. It says, we hold on to power, we hold on to greed, we hold on to things we don't really need. We hold on to hatred, we hold on to fear and close ourselves off till we can't feel you near. Then you pause and you start to open. Kids start to open. Open our hands, Lord, help us to go. Open our minds so your justice may flow. Open us up so your peace can pour through and make our hearts ready so we can hold you. Amen. So this will be something that gets repeated every week. And I just think it's brilliant. Mark is such an incredible author and creator of material for children in worship. So we thank Mark Burrows again for what he does. And that's kind of the essence of but you'll get to read the entire thing and see how that all unfolds. Okay, so the next section that happens is what I call a word for humanity, which really is the proclaiming of the word section. And in that, we have several different parts. We have Mark's feature song, which is the name of the service, get my words in there, which is the name of the service. And we also have a poem from my friend Bishop Latrell Miller Easterling. I have wanted to use her poetry in a series for a very long time, and she is such a prophetic preacher and poet, and has been writing poetry for years. So it was so easy to find poems that really fit each one of these services. Very powerful. So we kind of have this ancient text with the scripture. We have this modern day prophet poet, and then we have Mark's song. We can also call Mark a modern day prophet poet composer. And so all of these things are woven with the themes, with the feature song of the day. Now, you can do the feature song in terms of congregational, right from the songbook. And you can also do it as an anthem. You can do it as a hybrid. And we're going to talk to Mark as soon as he comes on. He's getting out of chapel as we speak. And he will come on in just a moment. And we will we'll talk to him about all of those options for that song. But for the sermon preparation, I hope that you will see all of those pieces as possible exegetical material. Okay, so one of your, I brought up the slide here that has the opening page to the sermon fodder and small group resource idea document. Now, in this is what you're going to want to have in front of you as you prepare your sermons. What we have in here are several things. So let me talk first about the second page has a list of possible book studies. Now, your small group sessions can be several things, and other series that I've done, I've suggested it's based on a book and it's one thing and it's all, but I wanted to give you some options because I know that every one of your churches is in a different place in talking about justice, right? It's just the nature of who we are as churches. Some churches have been on the forefront of justice issues and have talked openly about that for many, many years. And some of you have not. And so you're going to be entering into this conversation in many different places. So I wanted to give you choices that you might choose from for your small group materials. Now, if you don't do small groups, you might try that for the first time. But even if you don't want to do that for this series, all of this fodder in this is great material to help you write your sermons. Okay, so on that second page, there's possible book studies, and there's a list of books from our friends at the General Commission of Religion and Race, things that I've collected from other folks that have said these are the books that we really love around justice issues. So you could just decide to use a particular book to follow for your small group resources. Or you could follow the original study that was made based on these songs, on Mark Miller's songs. And we have links to every week for that. And that's all written out as a small group study, what to do, what supplies you'll need, what questions you ask. It's really an entry-level conversation. So there's going to be some of your churches that are ready for a more in-depth look. And so what I have done for every Sunday of the series is that I have put together, I'm on the slide now that says Lent 1, Child of God, Naming Each Other. I've got the scripture listed there. I didn't put the entire scripture in this document, but you can look at the script. I've got the synopsis right there, so as you're preparing your sermon, you can have it right there in front of you. The synopsis is just like the yeast in the dough. It just is sort of your jumping off point, right? I've got a link to the feature song so you can hear Mark sing that song as you write your sermon. And then I've got the prayer poem title from Bishop Latrell Miller Easterling, and you can look in the worship script to look at that poem as well. And then on every one, I have given you a little paragraph about baptism, the baptismal rituals and how they developed, and what part of the ritual really pertains to this particular week. And one of the things that I hope that you will do is to all along the way use this in your sermons to help people, educate people around baptismal rituals, and to also whet their appetite, so to speak, for being at the Holy Week ritual, which will be a very special remembrance of baptism. So all along the way, what we're doing is exactly what the ancient church did, and that is educating the catechumenate for their baptism. Only in this case, of course, it will be the whole congregation remembering their baptism in the dark of night on Holy Week in a very special ritual. So all along, I give you those connections to the historical and theological development and what parts of that rite will pertain specifically to the message for the day. I hope you find that helpful. And then there's a list of sermon fodder and small group study additions. So I always have the small group study utilizing the feature song that was the original inspiration for this series, which has Mark singing and speaking a little bit. I've used some of his words in our script for every Sunday, and then just a leader guide really for that. But then there's other articles that you might want to invite small groups to look at because they go more in depth, and you might just use them as sermon fodder. So that, I mean, there's more information than you can use in a 15 to 20-minute sermon. Your job will be sort of honing it down to what is it that my congregation needs to hear this year around justice, because we're all in different places in that conversation. So that's going to be important for you to discern. I can't discern that for you, right? Okay, so then we have the petitions, which is the prayer time every Sunday, and that uses what I mentioned before, this prayer posture of closing our fists. Confession is like letting go of something we don't need, right? So in the season of letting go or giving something up, rather than giving up chocolate or coffee or whatever it is, we're going to let go of those things that keep us from being agents of change in the world. Right? So every week I've made a suggestion about what it is that we can invite people to let go. And as we sing that Let Justice Roll and offer our petitions for the world, that will be that kind of letting go. So confession during Lent is that letting go. And as long as we've got Mark here, let's talk about Let Justice Roll, that little piece that sort of comes out of the middle of your longer piece called Let Justice Roll, that you did using Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. Is that the origin of that little piece, or was that a little piece before that? We know that it's in your book, Mark. Welcome, and tell us about Let Justice Roll.
Yeah, Let Justice Roll, that whole big anthem was originally designed, or I composed it for the Riverside Church in New York City. I started working there in 1999, and they had never had a celebration, a Martin Luther King celebration in January on his birthday. This is in 1999. Of course, he had spoken there in a very famous speech against the Vietnam War in 1967 on April 4th. So they were designing this big service, and Helen Chapio, who's United Methodist, who was associate music director at the time, asked if I would be willing to write something where the youth choir, the children, the adult choirs could all sing, could have something for the congregation to sing, big organ. So that's how it got designed. And
course, you had James Earl Jones, no less, doing the spoken parts. Hello.
that was really nice. That was a few years later at
gotcha.
Marble Collegiate. But yeah, Jim Forbes was the original narrator, and to him I dedicated the piece. But so that's how that nugget of the piece that's in the Roll Down Justice book is.
Right.
That's right.
Right. So one of the things, Mark, that I was saying to folks before you came on is that, you are a composer, a musician who is always connected your belief that we are called to make the world a better place with, singing, with music. And, this whole idea that we're taking our cue from Amos, who says, I despise your festivals. The Lord says, take away your solemn assemblies. I can't stand it anymore. And the question is, well, is that saying that God doesn't want our worship? No, actually, but it does remind us that worship without justice is not acceptable. Tell us a little bit about this passion of yours of connecting music and justice. And friends, we'll get back to going through the whole order of worship, but I just want to hear from Mark, because I want you to be inspired by his witness, because I have worked with Mark for almost 20 years now and have been so inspired by not only his musicianship but also his passion for justice. So tell us a little bit about that, Mark. How did that start?
That's wow, what a question.
Yeah.
And I think It starts with the joy of making music. I mean, there's no. Um, I think if music making slash justice making doesn't come from this deep place of joy, then it can turn very jaded, angry, bitter. All of the things that the music hopefully can dispel.
Mm.
And so, joyful music making was always a part of my life growing up. It's interesting. I think back when I was 12 years old or something, and I literally felt called to the music of Bach, of all people, J.S. Johann Sebastian. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about the Passacaglia in C minor, and I had to go down and play it. At 12 years old, I couldn't really play it. I could play the first few bars, but in the middle of the night, I went down to the piano. So there's a Bible story about that somewhere. Somebody's getting called up in the middle of the night.
Right?
So, uh, but so this joy of making music was first, and then uh, realizing as I'm getting older in the church that not only obviously does the church have issues internally to deal with that are very central to who we are and how we relate to each other and relate to God, but that the world is kind of hungry for things like joy, things like reconciliation, healing, that we speak directly to, meaning of life questions,
Mm.
and that music. Obviously, you all know how uh, music can express things that no other art can. Preaching, all of our varied arts, music has a very special place in kind of letting the spirit flow. And so, most recently, around questions, Draw the Circle Wide probably was my first musical composition that had which was, I have to say, inspired by Marcia.
Right?
Um,
Born in
at
my
first,
living room. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I got in touch with you, Marcia, in the early mid 2000s, I guess, to ask you about. I had to do a funeral for a person who had taken their own life, and
Mm.
the scripture was the story of Ruth, and that in times of mourning or crisis, what do we do? We gather together.
Yeah.
We say we're not going to let go of each other. And you said, Mark, there's a great lyric by Gordon Light called "Draw the Circle Wide." You might think about that and reshaping it, and that, of course, helped me write the music.
Yeah.
And then that song took on a new life of its own, of course, and this idea that we're all called to draw the circle of God's
Right.
love wider. So it's interesting to me now that I'm thinking about it. I didn't write that song as a justice song,
Right?
say, but the idea that people took it and said, "Wait, we're trying to draw God's love wider here.
Right.
This could be an anthem to that purpose." And it showed me in a really important way that uh, the music I write can be a vehicle to bringing people together, and then talking about the values that make
Right.
us followers of Jesus,
Right.
make us people that want to see a more just and equal society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really kind of how I see it.
Well, one of the things that I love about your skill is that you can create, this 12-minute piece that, for those of you who have, the resources and the skilled musicians to do that entire piece, we're suggesting you do that as part of the series. Um, but you can do these very complex things, but you also really value that putting it in the mouths of congregations, that when we sing together there is something else that happens as well, that it's one thing to listen to music, which has its own value, but then singing together actually does something, to us as a group body, building. I always say the mission of worship is building up the body of Christ for its work in the world through encounter with the holy living God. And encounter happens sometimes literally physiologically when we're singing together. What do you think is happening there, Mark?
Yeah, well, obviously, we know this science now that says our hearts begin to beat as one,
Right,
literally,
right.
are beating in sync with each other when we sing together, we breathe together. Um, yeah, so these physiological changes kind of point to the spiritual formation that happens, and it's typically anything that's worthwhile means it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
My musical gifts certainly are continuing to grow, and it's taken many, many years. So I think of our formation as a
Mm,
lifelong process. And so the seeds that we plant when we sing a congregational song uh, to a child or to each other might take years to
mm,
kind of unfold in the truth of what we're singing about,
mm-hmm.
um, which makes the music kind of timeless in a way. That's why we sing Isaac Watts and Wesley and the African American spirituals. But I would say, I always appreciate you, Marcia, uh, kind of reminding us that it, you know, this isn't like a one-off. Your church is going to be awesome now, but it's a process
Yeah,
that we kind of take on this journey that we're going to continue to grow
yeah,
literally
yeah,
in our understanding of what God is calling us to do and who we
yeah,
are. It's constantly changing.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, we need to be reminded every week, just like the
Right.
Israelites kind of wandered and forgot, we need to.
Yeah, that's right. We got to have, over time, we have to really keep steeping in that message. And that's really a wonderful uh, reason to do worship series and to sing some of these things over and over. I mean, in this series, you'll be singing that little bit of "Roll Down Justice" every week as that opening. You'll be singing "Let Justice Roll" every week during that prayer. It's going to seep in, and even the youngest among us in those shorter refrains can start to really. They start to hum it outside of worship, and then the benediction song, "May peace flow through me." I mean, that's one of those earworms for me that I sing over and over again. It just pops up into my head, and I think your congregations are going to love that song and finishing every worship service with that song. And it's really it's an opening. May peace flow through me. So Mark, the feature song every week has a feature song. I call it. As part of the proclamation part, I call it a word for humanity, and each of the services, the name is the name of your song. And so in that part, there's the scripture, there's Bishop Easterling's poem, and there is, of course, the sermon. And what I'm suggesting is that your song, that feature song for that week, can also be part of the exegesis in the sermon. I mean, use the song as sacred text, just as much as those other pieces, and unpack that song. Now, congregations are at different levels of musicianship. So I've had some questions about, people who don't have accompanists who feel skilled enough to do that many new songs. So I want us to just mention a few ways that you can, in that middle section, do these feature songs. One would be to use it just right out of the songbook. Hold that songbook up again, Mark. We're going to see the songbook. There it is, by the Choristers Guild. Yay! Use it just as it's written. Oh, and look at that CD. Tell us what's on that, Mark.
That CD has all the songs on it, sung by the vocals of Kristen Sefeli. It's good. She's really
Oh,
good.
great.
And Katie House, the editor of the book, played. So those songs will tell you how it goes, or you can
Okay,
use
it'll
them.
tell you how it goes. Plus, if you don't have musicians who can pull that off, listen to it, right? You could listen to the song in that section. You could listen to that. You could listen to the recording of Mark doing it. I've got the links there to the Bible study, and Mark is sitting there at the piano. You could watch it if you wanted to, if you have screens, right? We hope that you can have the congregation sing it, but there's nothing to say that they can't sing along with Mark or sing along with that DVD, because the point is we want you to be able to experience the song in a deep way. So if there's anxiety around that, there's many different ways to do it. The other way you can do it is as an anthem. So every one of these could be sung by an ensemble or by a choir. Many of them already have choral arrangements, and we've got the links to those. There's a couple of them that you were just making into anthems, and I know Choristers Guild is kind of trying to churn that out. I don't know
I
if
have those links. I have those links right now.
awesome. Can you put them in the chat box?
Yes, I think I can.
Okay, so he's going to put them in the chat box. So, friends, we were talking about the order of worship, and in this section, these are some of the alternatives that you can use to actually use go ahead and use that song, because the series is really based around those songs, and we want you to be able to do them no matter what the skill level of your folks. So there's ways to do it. Pick whichever way works for you. Okay, Mark is putting up the link to the choral anthem "How Long," and I think the other one was "The Day Is Coming," right?
Yep, here it comes.
Right. So I will be adding those to the music notes document, and I will send out a new version of that to everybody who has purchased the series. And for those of you who are in the Worship Design Studio and you get all of these series for free, you know that in our worship series section, that's where you can open up the ideas tab for that series, and there are several little sticky notes. We have a brainstorming wall in the Worship Design Studio, and I'll keep updating as these resources come in. All right, so
Marcia,
yeah,
I also have the link. I also have the link for "Let Justice Roll," the large anthem,
nice,
and the link to my store, so you
great.
can download there. There's, if you're interested in, there's brass parts, there's a timpani part. I haven't put that up. I can make that available later today as well.
Great, great. So I will just keep updating folks. So if you have purchased the series, then I'm just going to keep sending you things in emails. I've got all your emails, of course, and we'll make sure you have everything in your hands. All right, so let me move on. Just stay on, Mark, because we're going to talk more about some other stuff in a minute. But let me go on with, we're on the slide. That's page 3 of the overview. We talked about "Let Justice Roll," these petitions. Let me just say something about excuse me, the pollen is terrible here in Texas. Just a warning, Mark. Mark is about to come to Texas. We're going to be both presenting in Texas on the same day for different denominations in different part of the city. That's crazy. But anyway, so so the offering, in the offering time, one of the things that I love to do is to help visuals actually be something that we interact with, not just look at. And so that's what's happening in this series as well. And so what we're doing is we suggest blue strips of cloth, and you're going to be making a waterfall this whole series. You're going to start with Ash Wednesday, and you're going to just make the first sort of length of blue strips of fabric on a dowel. And then every Sunday, people will be writing something on a strip of cloth during the offering time. Then you will collect all of those up, and you will be adding those to other dowels and making a longer and longer waterfall. I cannot wait to get pictures from you all of this and see how because everyone will be different, and that will be awesome. But that's what you do during the offering time. And again, offering time, the music can be whatever you would like to do for that. We haven't made suggestions there. You might too, if you want to. If you did the congregational song for the feature song before the sermon of Mark's song, and then you want to do the choral anthem version of that there, you could. That's a possibility. And then I've written some words to a familiar doxology tune that fit the theme. So you'll see that in the scripts. And I often like to do that so that it's a familiar tune, and yet the words are just slightly reworked so that it really keeps that message alive in that. So just a couple of pictures here of the visuals. So what I imagine is that you will create on these dowels these blue pieces of fabric and tie them together so that, eventually get longer and longer and longer. Depending on your sanctuary, this will be on the wall perhaps, or if you can hang it from the air, if you have like a pulley system, that'd be really cool. But wherever you can do that. And I think you'll get creative with that around your space. Let's talk about a couple of other visual things. Of course, baptism being a central image in this whole series as you sort of take people and lead people up to remembering their baptism. Uh, do something beautiful with a bowl. You know, you can either take your existing font and put a different beautiful glass bowl in it, or you can create a whole different setting with a beautiful bowl. But do something to highlight that baptismal and the blue sort of, you see blue fabric here. Just get creative with it, and send us your pictures, because I always love to see what people do with these series and with your different visuals, taking sort of the seeds of our thoughts. And remember, there's lots of ideas in that visual and media arts document. Also, we're suggesting that you use clear bowls of water with floating candles in them in different places in the series, and then also have your small groups have that wherever they meet, so that they light those candles in that floating in that water. And then on Palm Sunday, there is a part of the ritual where you can have those small groups bring in those that water and pour it into a common container of water. So that's just another way. The picture on the bottom there, you can see I've got a light underneath a glass bowl that's in a stand. And this is a really effective kind of thing, especially in your Holy Week service, where we're suggesting that you have several of these bowls around with the candles, because we want to create this amazing mystical environment in which to remember our baptism and the depth of that there. Okay, so just finishing up this order of worship, closing hymn or song, as I said earlier, we want that to be super familiar. We've given you suggestions for things that are familiar, but again, choose whatever you think is going to be very familiar to your folks, so that that balances out with the new songs. The benediction, I have that all written out for you. It's a part of it is something that we'll say together, so that we're sort of blessing one another. And I believe that when we say the words of a blessing in the whole congregation's mouths in worship, then we understand ourselves as those who also can bless others in the world, right? We are a blessing in the world. I think that worship forms and shapes us. And so it's important that that the professionals don't do everything, that in this series, we're going to bless one another. So that benediction is there. And then we sing that beautiful little tune, May Peace Flow Through Me. After a couple of Sundays, your folks are going to know it by heart, and it's just going to be a beautiful way to end every service. And then going out, the postlude, that's energy for going out into the world. That's what I think a postlude is. So just choosing music that's going to draw on that energy of going out into the world is something that your musicians will discern on their own. Now, the non-Sunday services, Ash Wednesday, of course, is sort of the introduction to the entire series, with the imposition of ashes. The Holy Week pilgrimage. Now, let me just say something about the Holy Week pilgrimage. Mark, I've got them during that one doing the traveling song. And I see children leading us in that all through, because we're going to take a pilgrimage from the fellowship hall to outside, then finally into the sanctuary. So it's in these 4 different pieces. And the children sing that little traveler song in between as we move from each place. So that's a great way. I've got all through that Holy Week pilgrimage, I've got children and youth heavily involved in that. And I think it's going to be very formative for them to help lead that. Mark, you are such a wonderful, I don't know, your work with youth especially is just so empowering. And I know you love working with them. Can you just say a little bit about incorporating youth and as leaders and what they bring when they bring their presence?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's a brilliant idea that you have to use the song Traveling Companions for that purpose. Obviously, the energy that young people bring the spontaneity or playfulness of younger children that happen in worship is kind of a signal to us all that we shouldn't take ourselves so seriously, or make sure that we don't make our children into automatons, that have to follow every exact. It's kind of funny. We had a meltdown, or not a meltdown, but a malfunction moment at Christmas Eve that was kind of funny at our church with one of the sheep starting to direct the congregation. But one of the best parts of having children and youth involved is they can introduce something new to the congregation that might seem inaccessible or inappropriate or somehow underneath what
Right.
adults would do, but it's not at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
young people can really give us the energy and the will to try new things,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. The other thing is that the more children and youth you have involved in that service, the more attendance you're going to have. I mean, just plain and simple, right?
Marcia, we have a question also dealing with children in worship
Okay.
and how you might be able to adapt the children's resources for a congregation that, for example, has children in the beginning of worship and at the end with, 30 minutes or so in between where they would leave. So like adapting these resources for individual contexts.
Well, everybody is going to adapt the order of worship, that I've given you, depending on your particular context. So if you need to have that children's moment earlier in the service than it is, although it's pretty early, then you just move that to the place where it's going to work with your timeline, right? So that's the way I would answer that question, because it sounds like it's based on a timeline. And again, I want to reiterate that the order of worship that we have given you is, you can take that lock, stock, and barrel and just do it as is, or you may need to tweak it based on your context and your timing and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you for that question. The other thing about the Holy Week pilgrimage is that, in talking about attendance, is that I hear so many churches say, we spend so much time putting together Maundy Thursday and Good Friday, and we get, very small crowds. So one of the reasons why I created a one-night pilgrimage that goes through all 3 days, of what is called in Latin the Triduum, right? So Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and then Holy Saturday, which in the early church was that time for baptizing persons, but also a time where we go ahead, we light that Christ candle again. That Paschal candle gets lit in the middle of the night in the dark, and it's very dramatic. So a couple of reasons why I did that. One is that if you're really building up to that and you get great participation and lots of people in leadership for that, you can really put a lot of effort into that and have a good turnout. So what that does is it takes folks through the whole story. So by the time they get to Easter morning, they've been through the entire story, rather than a lot of people skipping from Palm Sunday to Easter, or doing Palm Sunday and maybe Maundy, Thursday, and then Easter, right? So it's kind of, I know it'll be different for some of you, and I've already gotten questions about, well, we do, Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, but you're saying one. So here's my suggestion. Well, several. One is, do the whole thing on one of those nights. Pick your night that has generally had the best attendance. Choose that night. And then on the other night, do something a little bit different. If you have to have something on the other night, do something a little bit different. So you could do the whole thing on Thursday night, and then Friday night, just have a vigil. So just have people come in and maybe have music playing, and maybe they sign up for time slots. I remember at my little church in Adrian, Missouri, we used to keep vigil through the whole of the 3 days, right? From Thursday to Sunday. And we would keep it going. And that was one of the most formative things. We got up in the middle of the night. Us teenagers wanted the middle of the night ones, right? So we would come middle of the night, sign up for a half an hour, and keep vigil in the sanctuary. And we did that. So that's a really cool thing you could do. Or you could, if you wanted to, split up our script and do the Maundy Thursday part, the very first part of it, which is a meal, right? And storytelling about meals and storytelling about Jesus around the table, not just the Last Supper, but all of his I mean, there's just so many stories about Jesus at the table because he kept breaking rules. There was drama, so they wrote about it in the Gospels. Um, so, just do that part and then do the other parts on Good Friday. You could do that. So just get creative with it. I want to challenge you to try to do it as a piece and see what impact that has. And then try to do something a little different on the other nights. You could, okay, let's say you do it on Good Friday, the whole thing. Just have your small groups meet on Thursday. Have that be their last time together, right, on that Thursday night, and have them share a meal. They've gotten really close during the whole series, so why not do that? That's another thing. Okay, so there's so much to talk about here. But let's get to some questions. I've got some of the questions that were sent in ahead of time. I've already answered the question about the roll down justice piece at the beginning. If that's overwhelming to your musicians, then use the let justice roll. That little piece you could use as the opening piece for that. We've talked about using some of the recordings if you need to do that. That was another question that came in. What other questions?
Yeah, we did have a question, I think, that was answered earlier from Martha about wanting to find some recordings of Mark's music. And
Great.
Mark shared that there's a CD available with the book, so that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I have some other questions about timeline with the worship services and kind of the order of worship that you've planned, Marcia. If the sermon is 15 to 20 minutes, how long approximately could you expect the rest of the service to play out?
Well, I generally, when I'm designing, I don't know, I have this canny sense of time when I'm, or maybe it's uncanny, I don't know, what's the phrase, when I'm designing. And so, I mean, I get that most churches want to have an hour service. And so most of them are that way. Now, when you add in communion, you may go over an hour on that on week 5, the way that I have designed that. Let me just, while I'm talking about communion, say that I didn't put in, I realize that for those of you who do communion on the first week of every month, that week 1 is communion. So in this year in Lent. So I suggest, and some of you do communion every week, and I got an email from somebody who does it on the first and third Sunday. So what I would do if I were you is in that petitions part where we're singing Let Justice Roll, I would do the confession part with the fists closed and then opened, and then go into one round of inviting people to lift up names or places in the world. Just compact that into one, because in the script it's 2. We do names and then places, but compact it into one, and then go right into whatever your communion liturgy is. Now, I have written a specific one for week 5. But if you're doing it more frequently than that, then use whatever communion liturgy is what you use. And I want to invite you to weave in some wording from that, from the theme as well. But make it all part of that petition. So it would just flow right out of that confession and petitions and flow right into your communion liturgy. Now I have written words for the Sanctus, the holy, holy, holy part. I have written words for the Sanctus that fit the Let Justice Roll tune. So use that every time during the series, every time during your communion, whether that's first Sunday, third Sunday, fifth Sunday, every Sunday, doesn't matter. But that's a way of then taking that Let Justice roll down like waters, taking that from the petitions and then continue and use that in your communion prayer. And then it fits it all together. I wrote words to your music, Mark, for the Sanctus. So,
wait to hear.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a songwriter if it's just one refrain. That's the limit. I am now claiming my songwriter status, but I've never written anything longer than one refrain. So I just admit it. Okay, so yeah, I'm hoping that this, in the script, as you look at my scripts, because I have all the words of the leaders, I have all the rubrics, I have everything in there, all the instructions, it looks like a lot. But when you actually put it together, it's not a lot. It flows. In fact, you're going to find it flows rather quickly in there. What else, Jenna?
We have another question. Can you give us some hints about where the other scripture texts and proclamation pieces are headed for each week? The outline of an arc of what topics each week covers.
Oh, okay.
The synopses.
Yep, that's in the synopses and scriptures document. You can see the entire arc all at one glance. If you have not purchased the series yet, you can go to worshipdesignstudio.com/rolldownjustice, and as part of that page, you can actually see those synopses and scriptures there already. You can also see the overview that I've been going over as well. So yeah, that's where you can see the whole arc. Great.
And also wanting to know, are they all in Romans, all baptismal texts?
No. Actually, I use the scriptures that were used in the Bible study that the General Commission on Religion and Race put together. So those are the scriptures that I used, so that it would go directly. If you're using that small group resource, those scriptures are going to be directly related to that small group resource. So you'll be looking at the same scriptures if you're using that as well.
And speaking of small group resources, that leads me into the final question that I have from Gail. The resource Entering into the Stories of Others is included as a coming soon on our sermon fodder document. Any word on kind of those last minute things that are coming together?
Yes, they're coming together. And they're supposed to be done by the end of the month. I have 2 that I got yesterday. They sent me. So I will continue to update that document and send that out, post it in Worship Design Studio. And those are all coming. So, just by the end of January, hopefully we'll have our hands on all of those so that you can see all of those. But definitely, Lent starts March 1st, so, we're hoping that they get those. This has been a really wonderful collaboration with the Commission on Religion and Race, and they so graciously, I asked them to supplement that small group study that they had already online with Mark, that they did with Mark. And they so graciously said that they would supplement other materials as well so that we could really give you some choices around that. And in fact, they decided to create some more. And so that's why we have this, coming. They're coming. They're working on them. But every one of the services right now has some already ready. But we'll keep adding those, and we'll keep getting them out to you. All right. Question is downloading in addition to purchasing the set. So let me tell you, all of those things that I had up before are included in when you buy the Roll Down Justice. The only things that are not included are the book, the Roll Down Justice songbook from the Choristers Guild. You'll want to get that. And then, of course, if you're going to use anthem versions of Mark's music, then you'll want to buy those separately. So you may use some of the songs as anthems and not others. So you'll just buy whatever anthems that you want to buy to go with that. The other thing that is coming is the Easter Sunday. We have a big opening that Mark and I used for General Conference 2008 that Mark put together, an arrangement, and it is so powerful, my friends. And so you will be sending that permission to send that to you and to use that. So that's coming to you. The other thing that if you want to do the full, for Palm Sunday, the full version of Let Justice Roll that Mark was talking about, that he created at Riverside, Mark has that link now, correct, to buy that in your store. And again, that's a longer work. It has parts for other instruments. So especially if you're a church that has an orchestra, or if you're in the habit of having a budget for those high holy days where you can hire musicians to come and do that, it would be a wonderful thing to put together. So that's not included in the downloads, but something that you can get. And through the entire scripts, friends, every script has links for all the music, and so the link should take you right to where you can buy those, as well as that music notes document. So yeah, we want to give a word of thanks to the Choristers Guild for, there were 2 of Mark's songs that didn't have current anthem versions, and Mark like whipped them out like he can do. Thank you so much, Mark. Amazing. And then we sent those to the Choristers Guild, and they said that they would get them ready. I mean, they published them probably faster than they've ever published a couple of anthems ever. So we're very, very grateful to the Choristers Guild for that, and so glad that we can support their good work through you purchasing that songbook and any of those anthems. Yeah. Okay, so let me get to some other the questions that came in over online. I've gotten to some of them. Okay, somebody said they couldn't find. I referred to the music resources document, but they can't find a document like that. I misnamed it. It's music notes document. Same thing. Music resources, music notes. Okay. Question about where to get the choral arrangements. In every script, I have the link, and in the music notes document, I have the link to the choral arrangements, and we'll be adding those two that Mark just got us, the links to. What exactly are we allowed to use and copy, and what music do we need to purchase to use this series in worship? You'll need to purchase the songbook Roll Down Justice, but Mark, tell us about at the back of the book, every song has a congregational song sheet. Can you open to one of those and tell us about that?
Yeah, so for instance, the book, which is $39.95, $40, it's a one buy for your congregation, and then once you buy it, you have permission to use something like this congregational setting of what does the Lord require of you, or let justice roll here. So all of the songs the 23 songs come with congregational pieces that you can then have permission to copy for no additional price. So yeah. I'd love for you to buy these books for your choir, but in case you can't, you can buy one for your congregation and then use the pieces.
Nice. So that's so great. And here's my suggestion is that even if you end up having your choir sing the feature song, I would put that in your worship guide anyway, because then people can see the words in front of them. They can, and most of your anthems, Mark, when you get to the refrain or something, turn around and treat the congregation like a choir and bring them in, right? So you have this hybrid of the choral anthem and then also bringing the congregation in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's see. I answered the question about traditionally doing Holy Thursday and Good Friday, so I gave you some examples of how you can adapt that. We want to have a virtual brainstorming resource gathering. Since the scripts are available, do you have suggestions of what type of questions we could ask to gather ideas and our resources? Okay, so what you're going to really do with these scripts, instead of brainstorming new ideas, go through the scripts first. That's what you're going to do. And what you're going to do is take a look at everything and say, does this fit our congregation? Do we need to adapt this in any way? Talk about the visual ideas and decide exactly how you're going to do that. If you use projection media, we've given you lots of links to possible water loops, waterfalls, and things that you could use throughout the series. Decide what you want to use. Decide what pictures of social justice movements that you want to use, as I suggested during that singing of Roll Down Justice every week at the beginning. What images are you going to use? So that's really what you're going to do with the full scripts, is discern what parts you need to adapt for your own context, and then brainstorm if there are pieces that you need to change. Brainstorm what you're going to do. Also, brainstorm how you're going to carry out. Where are we going to get? Is there a dollar store where we can get 20 of these bowls, these glass bowls? And where can we, get the cheapest floating candles? And what fabric store are we going to go to get this fabric? And when are we going to get together and cut strips until we're blue in the face? These are the things that you're going to work with on your team on these things when you have the full scripts. All right. Okay. Then I answered the question about the choir director saying it was too difficult to roll down justice. So use the Let Justice Roll prayer song in both places. It's easy. It has the same theme. That's a possibility. Okay, so I already talked about communion. I think I got to all those questions. Oh my goodness. Awesome. Okay. Do I already have access to the rest of the resources, or do I need to buy the full scripts, children's messages, etc.? Okay. When you buy the Roll Down Justice, all of those things, let me just go back to that slide. The children's messages, all of those things are part of your downloads. Okay. The overview, synopses and scriptures, music notes, visual media ideas, all the children's scripts, sermon fodder, small group resources, those are all included. The music to the opening Roll Down Justice for the liturgy, the music for the Let Justice Roll, the humming part that goes with the petitions, and then all of the scripts, that's all included. Okay, so that's what you have access to when you buy that. All you need to do is buy that's the songbook, and you're good to go, right? And then whatever anthems that you decide you want the choir to do of those feature songs. All right? Yeah.
So the songbook or the anthems, as far as I know, are not available for download. It would be hard copies that you'd be buying.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to do that soon, right? So now is the time to sit down, go through all of it, with your music director, and figure out which ones you want to do, of the anthems especially. Get that songbook ordered right away. I know they did do another run of them so that they have enough, because we've got so many people utilizing this. It's so awesome. I'm just so grateful as we come to the end here. I'm just so grateful, Mark, for you and your music, which was the inspiration for this series. And I cannot think of a better time for these messages to be the ones that we proclaim during the Lent season. So thank you so much, Mark, for what you do in the world, and the ways that you're helping churches to really feel hope. I think this is going to be a very hopeful series, right? What can we do in times that feel so uncertain? And especially just starting with singing together is the first step to doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Marcia, so much. It's been a pleasure to always collaborate and work with you, and do something good for all the congregations we get to work with.
Yeah. Mark and I both have roots in United Methodism, even though we work with many denominations. And one of the things I love about Wesley is that, he talked about enthusiasm, which in an age of reason was like a bad word, right? These enthusiastic Methodists, it was kind of, a little bit too brash, those Methodists. But Wesley also said it's not just enough to be enthusiastic in your worship, but that was the first step to what he called practical acts of charity. So in other words, to be inspired by your worship, to become enthusiastic because of the body coming together and singing together, and singing lustily and with good courage, no doubt, and not singing as if you are dead. That's another one of my favorite Wesley instructions for singing. That this is the first step to really understanding ourselves as a body with the agency to do something good in the world. And our baptism necessarily calls us to that thing. Yeah. So friends, thank you so much. For those of you who, when you buy the series and you go and you download all those materials, there's a code that you have to put in order to get them. But right away, you should get an email that has that link, has that code, and you should be able to download immediately and get started on planning your Lent. Because just think of it, just take a couple of days, immerse yourself in it, figure out what you need to do, and you are on the road to being ready for Lent, including all of those great sermon starters and small group materials. And Mark, many blessings on everything that you're doing and continuing to create. We're so happy that you're prolific, because the world needs your music.
Thanks so much, Marcia.
Yeah, and thanks for taking this time to be with us today, and get a feel for your passion around music and justice.